Hi everyone, I'm Sarahn and I am reviewing I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. So I first found out about this book directly from my cousin who read it and told me that it changed her life and that she thought it would also change mine if I read it. I'm familiar with some of Maya Angelou's works, so I was excited to read it, but for some reason I had never brought myself to the book. So I was grateful that someone else brought it to me just because I know it's a classic and I know the impact that it's had on African American women and the African American community. So I was excited to read it. I first got into this book very open to what I would get from it. I knew it was a biography about Maya Angelou's life, so I thought that it was going to be through her adulthood, but I found out that it's actually only the first 17 years of her life, which is really interesting. So her character in the book's name is Marguerite, and it is about her youth and adolescence as she's growing up in the South and in California with her grandmother and her parents. There's different conflicts that enter the story related to race and class and gender, which one could argue are probably some of the most prominent and influential themes and conflicts in literature. But it was definitely one of those stories that included all of those things, as well as sexual discovery and trauma and different types of pain. So it was definitely interesting on that front. She's living in the South for most of the story, so she's dealing with that experience of being a young Black woman growing up in the South, and it's interesting to see how she manifests into maturity with her grandmother being her primary caregiver, and by interacting and being influenced by all of these other things that have constructed African American experience in the Deep South. So early on in the story, Marguerite shows characteristics of being really intelligent and mature for her age. She tells a story from a standpoint of herself, but it's interesting how she uses adult ideology and language in her experience through adolescence and adulthood to merge these ideas of honesty and authenticity, but also humility and vulnerability to create the experience that her character is having through her adolescence. It also includes really interesting themes around geography and religion. Her grandmother raises her in a church, so you get to see a lot of the prominent factors of African American religion in the early 20th century, particularly the 1930s and 40s, and that the effect that that has on her life and her experience. You also have some elements of the Great Migration into the story, and also World War II, which she is around for in some of the later teenage years. I was really introspective when reading this book. I felt like I could relate in so many ways to her experiences, but also at the same time, they were so unique and new to me. So it was this interesting balance of stepping in and out of the story and really looking at myself and saying, how am I relating to this? What aspects of my experiences am I remembering as a result of reading this book? And I think that was one of the most important things that I got from it, just understanding how other people were connecting to the book in maybe the same way. And I know that's millions of people. Of course, this book has been around for decades, generations, and it has had so much of an impact on people. And I was thinking about the experiences that she was going through as a woman, as a Black person, as someone living in poverty. I don't want to spoil the story and tell you all that she goes through, of course not, but definitely I felt introspective. I also felt very humble to be able to analyze her life in a way that I hadn't had a chance to even analyze mine, and the way that she uses descriptive language and poetry to create this feeling around the text is really one of my favorite things about the book. You can tell that as an adult writer, she definitely didn't hold back too much of her feelings about what it was that she experienced in her adolescence. So you get this sense that she really dedicated her life and really put a lot of her emotion and her energy into the book. And I think that's one of the strongest things about this text. So the book is broken up into chapters. Each chapter tells a different short story about her life. So it is written chronologically, so you can flow through it from beginning to end, but very well you could open up to chapter 15 and read that short story and be moved or influenced by it in some ways. So I think that was my favorite and least favorite thing about the book. My favorite part was that you're getting so many different types of experiences that she went through that just cover so many areas of life, but some stories I think were stronger than others, not in the sense of how it was written, but just in what it means or the weight that it had for me. I also had to remind myself that so many people can relate to experiences that she's had that I can't relate to. So there was also that element of understanding that maybe what moves me and what inspired me is different than what moves and inspires someone else. So that was something that I had to remember. The dialogue was really strong. She used Ebonics very well to depict a lot of communication that people have and engage in the African American community, especially in the South. You see her formal education kind of influenced that as well. She seems to be different than a lot of the people that she's around. Her character stands out compared to all of the other characters in the book, but at the same time, the character development across the board is really strong. I would say the overall tone of the book it's a semi-sweet story. It's sweet because she's so brilliant in her analysis of all that is going on in her life, but of course she deals with a lot of trials and tribulations in her story that introduced a genuine feeling of sorrow for the reader to experience. But I think that's what makes this book so special, is that you know that her experiences are ones that people have had, that you have had, and I think that's so powerful as a reader to feel that connection between you and the text. I definitely applaud Maya Angelou. I bow to her in her writing style and in the authenticity of this book. I think it's very special. It makes sense why it goes down in history as being such an important and prominent book in African American literature. I think that the main themes that she wants the reader to experience are race, gender, and age. Ageism, sexism, and racism are really what the whole story is about. She's a black girl growing up in the South, and all of those things, her youth, her race, her gender, ultimately kind of design what her story is about. And I think that that's really strong. I think that that's really interesting. I think it's important to gain insight from this book to get an idea about where we might be in our lives. I think that no matter where you are in your life, if you in some ways can relate to any of her experiences, any aspects of being black, being young, being a woman, being confused, being assaulted, discovering yourself through discovering the world and discovering other people, that you can definitely gain from this text and be inspired to share your own experiences with others, as well as the book with someone who you think might enjoy it. All in all, I think that I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was a great book for me to start with for the 17 books that I'm reading, reviewing, and resourcing this year. I think that it encompasses a lot of important themes for any reader to interpret and to understand and apply to their own life. So I would definitely be resourcing this book for the vulnerability and strength that the main character exudes and holds on to throughout this experience, as well as her just vast curiosity for what the world has to offer her and how she is open to that while still remaining true to herself. I think that is such an important reason to resource and have I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings on your bookshelf. So you can find I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou anywhere. The library, you can get it from a friend. I'm going to pass it on to a friend of mine, or Amazon.com. Thank you for listening. Peace.